Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going back to that project box and we're going to do a Zebco Low Profile bait casting reel today. This is a 2-ball bearing reel, so it's just above the entry level mark. This is a CL200C with a magnetic spool control, and it's a nice slightly above entry level reel. It's made by Zebco. Zebco also makes Quantum and makes Finor and Van Staal. So you know that it's a company that can be trusted. But one of the things with the Zebco line, Zebco tends to be the lowest end of the product line there, moving up to Quantum and then moving over to Finor or Van Staal. They also make Rhino, but you don't see too many Rhino reels any longer. You see a lot of Rhino rods. One of the things that differentiates the Zebco brand from the others is that parts are generally not available for these reels. So if you're picking one of these up at a tag sale or a flea market or something, make sure all the pieces work, because the only way you're going to find a part if one is broken is to go to a donor reel or one that's broken that you can go ahead and get some parts off of. So let's show you how to take this apart, service it, what the engineering is, and fix things, I guess, if they are broken. I start by removing the handle, and by the time we're done with this, I think we'll probably have every part off of this reel for reassembly. But I take the handle off first. It's held by a handle nut cap that had a screw. You saw me take that off earlier, and then you saw me take the handle nut off, and then the tension spring. So you'll notice a couple of things right off. I use a parts tray for all of my small pieces and parts. That way when I go to reassemble, I know where they are. It also helps me track whether I've put the pieces and parts back on, because if there's something left in that tray when I think I'm done with the reel, then I've got a problem. Okay, so I've taken off the star drag, and then there should be 3 washers here. There is. Just note these as they come off. There's 2 that are the tension washers, and then there's a kind of a brass colored washer that sits on top. Also, these washers are concave. They're not flat. They can be used to adjust the tension on that star drag nut. You can sit them side to side, back to back, which you can note the space in there, and then face to face. And each one of these has a little bit of a different feel to it as you're tightening up that star drag. So when you do that, make it a point to notice how they came out. And if you don't like the tension on that star drag nut, if it's not sensitive enough or too sensitive, you can go reverse those 2 and make that work better. All right, there's 2 posts that go through that hold the side plate on. Generally these are the same size, but in this case these aren't. You'll notice that there's a small or shorter and a long one. The long one came out of the back, the short one came out of the front. These are things you need to pay attention to as you go to rebuild reels. And just from experience, I've noticed that there's a lot of manufacturers out there that have different sizes of screws and things in the side plate, so I've come to be aware of that, and it makes me check every time I bring these off. Those 2 should be the only thing holding the side plate on. This is a magnetic side plate, so I want to check to make sure that it's clean. And this is one of 2 bearings here. It's got a little bit of grease on it, but I oil bearings. So I'm going to use an oil design for fishing reels. This is a Reel X oil. Any manufacturer's oil will work fine, but make sure that you're using a fishing reel lubricant. Don't go using general purpose oils. Don't go using automotive oils. They're not designed for fishing reels, and some of the properties don't work well within the reels themselves. They may be too thick or too thin in viscosity and so on. All right, we're going to take the nose plates off now. Like I said, we're pretty much going to get down to taking every piece and part off of this reel to service it. This nose plate is held on with a little set screw. Again, I'm kind of relying on my memory on these, but if you don't work on these frequently, I would encourage you to take pictures as you go so that you know the sequence that these came off of, and also notice anything in there that might be a little bit quirky. Okay, and then this trim plate here should just lift off. There should be some tabs. There you go. There's 2 tabs here that kind of slide under these indentations here and sit on top of that. Okay, so before I take this side plate off, I always make it a point to drop the free spool assembly knob down. That's because when you go to rearrange a lot of the times with this, there's a setup inside of this thing internally that does not engage, and you wind up coming back and trying to reset that free spool. Okay, I'm going to take these two side plate screws off now, and that's the only thing holding the side plate on, I hope, at this point. Again, I'm going to compare to make sure that they are the same screws, which they are. Put them into my parts bucket. I'm going to lay this down now. It's easier for me to take the side plate off this way. And also, underneath those two screws, there should be two springs and a carrier assembly. I don't want to lose them. Okay, the carrier assembly came out. Here's your other bearing, so I'm going to lubricate that while I have the side plate available. I'm also now just going to check. This is a nice clean reel, so it just needs a little bit of lubrication in order to make this thing go properly. But let's continue taking this apart just to show you how this reel is set up. Two springs that came off the free spool assembly there. Take those and put them in my parts bucket so I don't lose them. Here's your main gear. We'll take that off. And again, we're going to notice a couple of things here. We're going to notice what's on the back of it. This is the rotor, the tooth gear that trips the free spool assembly. And there's a washer underneath that. And there's your main gear. I should only have one drag washer in this, and I think it's going to be Teflon. I do. The main gear is clear, which is what I want to see. This is a Teflon washer, so Teflon washers don't get anything. They're kind of self-lubricating, being a plastic type of a piece. And then there's the main piece on top of that, the metal washer for the drag. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that back that way. And then I'm just going to check the teeth on these and make sure that all of the teeth are present, not chipped, broken, cracked, or any other thing. I'll just go pull the free spool assembly spool gear off here. Just again, I want to make sure that this plastic carrier piece is not broken, and we're in good shape with that. And I can put a little bit of blue grease on the spool gear. And for the blue grease, I use another grease designed for fishing reels. In this case, it's a Penn Precision Reel grease. Any manufacturer's grease and aftermarket products will do. But again, with the word of caution that it needs to be made for fishing reels. Okay, we'll just go reinstall this then. It's a clean reel. The only service required was lubing those bearings, making sure that your drag washers were clean. Getting this set up here for the free spool release to make sure that's all set. We're going to put that back on. We're going to make sure that the tongue is set here for the free spool. And that it's engaged. There we go, that's engaged. Put that little black washer back on. Put the main gear back in. Make sure that the main gear engages with the spool gear. And then this is the ferrule that the anti-reverse gear bearing rides on. Here's your anti-reverse. You don't need to do much with the anti-reverse. You could put a little blue grease and you can put a little oil in there. Most of the time they don't require a lot unless you see that there's a buildup of salt or something else in that regard. I'm going to take my two springs now, put them into the indentations in the carrier assembly. We're going to take the side plate, and we're just kind of reversing what we did to take this off now. You want to make sure you're square, which is why I've been working on this kind of on the bench, because I like to keep the tension there. Make sure that it gets done properly. I'm looking into one hole here for the screw, and it seems like that spring might have just been off a little bit. Then I'm going to come back to my parts tray and pull those two Phillips head screws that hold this side plate assembly on. Once you get one on, you can kind of let the tension go most of the time. It doesn't hurt to do this. So I've been doing fishing reels now for over 20 years. Just took it up as a hobby. It's still a hobby of mine. a little business on the side. But for the most part, everything that I've done here and I've learned is something that you can do along the way. It takes a little patience. It takes a sense of humor. It takes some tricks that maybe you've learned. There are some reels that have some quirks out there. But if you just take your time, take your pictures, protect yourself, and have the right tools, most of the time, these things are just not that complicated. Okay, I've reinstalled those two little tension washers for the drag and put the drag washer back on as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this star drag nut on. Just get it started there. And then I'm going to come over and we're going to put the spool in. And when you're putting the spool in, if it has line on it, you got to be careful because sometimes this line gets trapped in the side plates. So just be a little bit careful. Again, patience kind of is more than just that little virtue there, right? Okay, we're going to go over and put that trim piece back on now. It's got the two tabs. They kind of slide under. So you just got to be careful with that. You should hear them snap in, which we just did there. You can put that nose plate on, and somebody will come back and I'm sure tell me it's not called a nose plate, it's called something else. But one of my quirks, I just kind of call it as I see it. I don't typically go to schematics to find out the proper terminology for these. And if I offend somebody, I apologize for that. But the proof is in how you service the reel, not necessarily what you call the pieces and parts along the way. Okay, so this one now has that little set that holds that front piece in place. And with that set now, we can go ahead and put the other side plate on. Now, this is a magnetic side plate here, so just be careful with it as you're putting it in. And that magnetic knob just helps hold the control the tension on the spool when casting. Remember, we have the two posts now, and the one was smaller than the other. So I'm just going to lay them down, find the small one, because I made a note that the small one went in the front. And I'm just hand tightening them. I'll take a screwdriver and just finish it maybe a quarter of a turn there, but you don't need a lot more than that. These are designed kind of as thumb screws. All right, put that one back on, grab that star nut, and finish tightening that down. And there we go. So we're back to an operating reel now. And this was why we put it down. We want to make sure that we had this assembly correct. And the last thing I'm going to do on this is just put a little bit of oil onto the worm gear there. And that'll keep the pole and the worm gear operating effectively. So even though this is a lower end reel, it does need the service, particularly if it is exposed to the elements a lot. I know sometimes we all don't like to admit it, but we leave the reel out on the porch or in the shed or in the garage. The rain, the snow, the mud, and everything else kind of gets washed up on it, and it needs to be cleaned. It also needs to be cleaned after you take it on a trip. These things are not indestructible. They should be washed down after every trip with fresh water, just to keep the contamination out of it. As I mentioned early on, this is not a sealed reel, and as such, if the water's dirty, if you've been in mud, if you dropped it in the river, the pond, the bay, what have you, then it's going to deteriorate or clog up the inner workings. It's just not going to work as smooth as it once did. So we're done. That's how you service a Zebco CL200C. It's a nice reel. I'm going to guess the pricing is probably in the $20 area, $20, $29. Probably comes on a little flipping stick, 6 foot long, maybe medium weight rod. And it's going to be great for the entry-level fella, for the guy who needs the extra rod for the cabin or the boat. And it's going to last a long time if you keep it serviced. So that was the intent, to show you how to do this and how it's made today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it on YouTube. If you want to see more of these, please subscribe to my channel as I post all the reels that come into my shop. So we'll get started on another one in the near future. And if you want to see those updates, please subscribe. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.